Hey, what's going on, guys? Thanks for checking out this video, my sports Gematria. Just wanted to talk about something that just kind of sprung in my head when I was doing some numbers. It's about David Stern, the former commissioner who just passed away at the age of 77 this week, and the star player on the Mavericks, Luka Doncic. I'm pretty sure I pronounced his last name wrong, but either way, he wears the number 77. So we have David Stern, the commissioner, who died at age 77 this week. Former NBA commissioner David Stern. And then we have this guy, the star player, 20 years old, on the Mavericks, who wears the number 77. Why am I making this a connection? I wrote a post on my Sports Gematria Patreon, and I'm just going to go ahead and read it to you guys, and then I'm going to show you the examples that I pulled. So I need to make a video, which I'm doing right now, about the Mavericks and the number 77 that has followed their games this year. Now, this is something I noticed even before David Stern had passed away this week. I had noticed there has been a handful of games involving the Mavericks where the number 77 has come up. And I just associated automatically with Luka because he wore the number 77. And it hasn't steered me wrong so far. But it makes it even more interesting now that we see that David Stern, the former NBA commissioner, passed away at the age of 77. So kind of maybe adds a little bit more, another layer of something. I don't know. I don't know what it quite is, but it is interesting to see. So their star player, Luka Doncic, I think is this pronounced, I don't know, wears the number 77. And the death of David Stern at age 77. On Thursday, which is this past week, the day after David Stern's death, the Mavericks played their 77th all-time head-to-head matchup against the Nets and won. This is not the first time I have seen the 77 head-to-head this year with Mavericks. So what I'm talking about is the day after David Stern dies at 77, the Mavericks play the Nets. And it was their 77th all-time head-to-head matchup between these two teams, and the Mavericks won the game. And so I thought that was interesting. What's also interesting that I don't note here in the writing is the Suns, or excuse me, not the Suns, but the Thunder and the Spurs. The Thunder picked up their 77th head-to-head regular season against the Spurs that same night that the Mavericks were playing their 77th all-time, which just happened to be the day after David Stern had passed away at the age of 77. Another example that comes to mind was when Mavericks and the Pistons played in Mexico earlier in December. It was their 77th all-time head-to-head matchup, and Mavericks became 17-7 for the season that night with a win. Luka Doncic, I pronounced it wrong, I know. His name sums to 177 in the four base ciphers. So the second example that immediately comes to my mind that I just remember just because of how it went down was the Mexico matchup, the NBA Mexico City Games. And it was the Mavericks versus the Pistons. It just happened to be their 77th all-time head-to-head matchup between each other. And I even wrote it out, Luka Doncic, who sums to 177 and wears the number 77. Mavericks became 17-7 for the season and their 77th all-time head-to-head matchup. So I was already kind of following the 77 pattern with the Mavericks before this David Stern death popped up. And this isn't the only example. There's a few other examples. I just have to go through and find them. I've done 69 PDF files on the NBA season so far, and I just have to go through each one and look at each Mavericks game and just find out where the other 77s are. But this one came to my mind immediately because it just stuck in my mind with the 177 and the 77. This happened earlier in December. And then, of course, the day after David Stern's death, they played their 77th all-time. Luka currently leads first-round NBA All-Star voting alongside Giannis, and I ain't gonna try and pronounce his last name. Now, this doesn't mean that the Mavericks are going to the playoffs. It doesn't mean that they're going to go deep into the playoffs. But it just means that there's an interesting pattern that I've noticed with the number 77 and the Dallas Mavericks in general. And then you come and put in the death of the former NBA commissioner at the age of 77, which just happened this last week during this NBA season. And you know, it's kind of interesting. It's definitely kind of interesting. Let's go back here. Luka, NBA icon Jerry West says Mav star Luka will be better than Dirk. How the Mavericks built a contender around Luka. His dominant game against the Nets the day after the death of David Stern, their 77th all-time head-to-head. Interesting pattern here. So I wanted to make a quick video on that. I wanted to read my paragraph that I wrote on my Patreon and just kind of show you the examples. And just so, let's put this in just so you guys can see what I'm talking about with the 177. 177.